Welcome. Today we will delve into the very heart of one of the most brutal and decisive battles of World War II, the Battle of Guadalcanal, which changed the course of history in the Pacific region. But what if I told you that behind this powerful conflict lie secrets that remain hidden to this day? Imagine, in August 1942, American forces capture a strategic airfield, seemingly a decisive victory. But at the same time, Japanese forces begin preparing a counterattack, and their plans threaten to destroy the entire strategic outpost. During several days of fierce fighting, the Americans, thanks to the heroism of their commanders and unexpected tactical decisions, hold the ridge despite the enemy's numerical superiority. Why did the Japanese attack, despite all efforts, end in failure? And what secrets are hidden behind those mistakes that nearly cost the Allies the final victory? Currently, the stakes are control over the region, the fates of thousands of soldiers, and the future of the entire campaign in the Pacific. In this investigation, we will uncover all the secrets, separate truth from myths, and reveal who was truly orchestrating this battle. Are you ready to see what is hidden in archives and stories of heroism? Then let's begin. On that fateful August day, when the sun rose over the Pacific Ocean, one of the most intense chapters of World War II began. The Battle of Guadalcanal. This island, seemingly insignificant at first glance, became the arena of a strategic confrontation that determined not only the course of the campaign in the Pacific, but also the fate of the entire war in the theater. At its heart were vital objectives, each of which held significance beyond mere territorial possession. Control over Guadalcanal meant control over communication lines, transportation routes, and the ability to impose one's will on the enemy. At that moment, a struggle for its destiny was unfolding, a fight that could shift the balance of power in the region and ultimately influence the outcome of the entire global war. Guadalcanal in the 20th century became a symbol of determination and strategic importance. In 2021, when the world was immersed in the chaos of global conflict, control over this island became a goal for both sides. For the Japanese command, it was the key to breaking the communication line between the United States and Australia, a bridge through which supplies, troops, and resources supporting their expansion in the southern Pacific could pass. For the Americans, it was the last bastion preventing Japanese advances, a shield protecting their communications and strategic interests in the southwestern Pacific. Under these conditions, each side understood. Capturing or holding Guadalcanal was not just a battle for land, but a war for dominance in a region where every minute and every decision could be decisive. Part 2 of 14. The key object for both sides was Luga Point, the most strategically important airfield, whose construction was completed by August 2002. This airfield, located on the island's western shore, was not just a strip of land paved with asphalt. It was a living, breathing instrument of war, a point from which the deadly wind of bombers and fighters could emanate. Control over Luga Point meant dominance in the sky, the ability to impose one's conditions, block enemy supplies, and exert pressure on Japanese forces. Its construction was a story of perseverance, engineering genius, and human bravery amid constant attacks and resource shortages. Time passed, and by August of that fateful year, when Allied forces began the siege of Guadalcanal, victory in the struggle for Luga Point was only a matter of time. Operation codenamed Watchtower was a decisive moment when the Americans took a bold and risky step. Starting early in the morning with a massive airstrike and an amphibious assault, it resulted in the Americans capturing the crucial airfield in early August and naming it Henderson Field. This move was a strategic victory that threw the Japanese command off balance and strengthened the positions of the Allied forces. The capture of the airfield was not just territorial expansion. It was an act of authority, a display of strength, a signal to the enemy, here, on Guadalcanal, we are the masters. This success marked the beginning of a new phase of the campaign, when Marines under General Vandergrift fortified the perimeter around Henderson Field. 18,000 fighters, tired but resilient, set up camp amidst tropical hell, engulfed in battles and constant threat of Japanese counterattacks. Their task was to preserve the conquest, hold the positions, and prevent the enemy from regaining what was lost. Every step they took was a fight for survival, for strategic victory, for the future of the entire campaign. This moment was not just a tactical victory. It became a symbol of determination, resilience, and strategic brilliance of American command. Control over Guadalcanal and its key objects became a turning point in the course of the war. It demonstrated that even in the most difficult conditions, with resource shortages and constant danger, success could be achieved if there was willpower and a clear understanding of objectives. It proved that naval power, air superiority, and decisive amphibious landings could change the course of battle. But all of this was only part of a broader picture. The question that still remains is, how did this struggle for Guadalcanal and its assets influence the strategic outcome of the conflict in the Pacific? What role did this battle play in the global war? What lessons did it teach, and to whom? The answers to these questions lie deep within history. This battle became a turning point that forever altered the balance of power in the region. It proves that even in the most hopeless situations, even when it seems everything is lost, determination and strategy can lead to victory. Guadalcanal became not only a symbol of fighting spirit, but also a lesson for future generations of military commanders. The struggle for the island and its key objectives encapsulated the essence of war, a game of strategy, strength, and fate. It was precisely because of these events, and thanks to the resilience of those who refused to surrender, that America was able to turn the tide of the campaign, shift the situation in its favor, and establish dominance in the Pacific. Ultimately, this battle became not only a military confrontation, but also a symbol of how determination, courage, and strategic genius can change history. Therefore, it will forever remain in memory as one of the most pivotal moments of World War II. A lesson that teaches that in war, victory depends not only on weapons, but also on willpower and the ability to see beyond the immediate. The time when the world seemed flooded with bright light of change and hope was passing, bringing with it new battles, new strategies, and new sacrifices. In the silence of the distant Pacific theater of operations, a covert but incredibly important struggle was unfolding. The preparation of Japanese forces for a repeat operation that could alter the balance of power on Guadalcanal. This chapter is not just a chronicle of events. It is a mirror reflecting the ambitions, strategic plans, and psychological resilience of those standing on the brink of fate. The Japanese commanders and soldiers, their secret plans carefully devised and rigorously executed, form a complex mosaic in which every detail matters. At the center of this dramatic story is the 17th Army, under the command of Lieutenant General Harukichi Yamaguchi. In his hands lie not only the forces but also the fate of those who hope for revival and victory. It was this army, precisely and ruthlessly concentrated in Rabaul, that became the core of the future offensive, prepared to once again disrupt the calm of the American forces, fortified and confident in their defense. In this narrow, quiet corner of the Pacific, Japanese commanders were not merely assembling troops. They were creating a mechanism capable of breaking through enemy defenses, destroying hopes, and turning the tide of events in their favor. The plan, devised in the shadows, was clear and ruthless. An attack on Lunga Road. This road became a symbol of breakthrough, an artery through which victory was to flow. The strategy involved dividing forces into three parts: Western, Eastern, and Central. Each had its own task, its own capabilities, and its own risks. The Western flank was perhaps meant to distract the Americans, make them disperse and lose their combat rhythm. The Eastern group, including the Kumai Battalion, was more mobile, capable of striking unexpectedly and creating chaos behind enemy lines. The Central Force, 3,000 men, was the main striking force, intended to break through fortified positions and unbalance the enemy. All of this was part of a carefully crafted scheme designed to work in 1942, during the height of the Japanese offensive. But when did the preparations begin? The time was critical, September 12th. But starting from the 5th, Japanese forces began active operations, reconnaissance, artillery shelling, and preparations for night raids. Everything proceeded according to plan, like a well-oiled mechanism moving without failure. Explosions, the hum of aircraft, rustling sounds, and commanding shouts. All of this created an atmosphere of imminent combat. Their goal was to defeat the American forces at Guadalcanal, to regain control over the strategically vital island, which had become not only a battleground, but also a symbol of Japan's ambition to expand its influence in the Pacific. The Japanese relied on a combination of air and sea strikes, counting on the speed and precision of their actions. At night, when darkness cloaked the battlefield, they planned to deliver strikes that, it seemed, would catch the enemy off guard. Night raids involving both landing craft and aircraft were intended to create chaos, confuse the Americans, disrupt their communications, and facilitate a breakthrough. But weapons and tactics alone were not enough. Japanese commanders also depended on the psychological aspect, believing that fear and disorientation would work in their favor. During this period, large-scale troop movements took place in the rear of the Japanese forces. Taiwan, New Guinea. All these regions were transformed into logistical hubs through which hundreds and thousands of tons of supplies, weapons, ammunition, and personnel were transported. The use of the Tokyo Express, the name given to one of the fastest and most secret routes, allowed for significantly speeding up the transfer of troops and resources. In conditions of fierce competition for time, every minute could be decisive. This heavy, tense, and complex logistical operation became the invisible thread linking the actions of commanders and soldiers, making their offensive possible. But, at the heart of all this preparatory activity lay a key question. Could the Japanese forces break through the fortified American defenses and regain control of Guadalcanal? This was not just a military question. It was a matter of fate, of the possibility to shift the balance of power. The Americans, fortified and prepared, had no intention of surrendering the island without a fight. Their lines of defense and strategic positions were all carefully fortified. In this confrontation, every minute, every tactical mistake, every wrong decision could prove decisive. The Japanese understood this, and that is why their preparations were so meticulous, secretive, and driven by desperate resolve. But just at this moment, on the eve of the decisive assault, during the night, when everything seemed to be proceeding according to plan, factors emerged that changed the outcome. Unexpected errors, tactical miscalculations, and unforeseen circumstances unfolded on that fateful night of September 20th and 21st. In the darkness, in silence, while the enemy awaited the attack, Japanese troops encountered unexpected obstacles and their own unanticipated weaknesses. The unanswered question remains, despite all efforts, were they able to break through the fortified American defenses? Or was this step the final blow to their ambitions, the last attempt to change the course of history? The answer lies hidden in the dark depths of the night, in the shadows, in the fates of those who dared to believe in victory and faced harsh reality. This story is not only about tactics and strategy, it is about the people whom destiny placed in front of the impossible, about how mistakes and unforeseen circumstances can change everything, how the shadows of the night can conceal victory or defeat. And it serves as a reminder that in war, as in life, nothing is predictable, and every decision, every action, can become a turning point that determines the outcome of a battle, and perhaps the entire era. On that fateful night, when darkness enveloped Tasimboko, and silence was only occasionally broken by the rustling of night winds and the soft whisper of waves, American troops led by Captain Red Mike Merritt Edson began their dangerous and risky maneuver. It was not just another landing operation within the scope of the Pacific Theater campaign. It was a decisive moment when the fate of the future battle could be decided on the shore, in the quiet of the night, in the shadows of Japanese warehouses and radio stations. At this hour, when most of the troops were still asleep or at least immersed in anxious anticipation, Edson and his team, like fate hunters, infiltrated territory that the enemy seemed to have left almost undefended. Their steps were silent, as if fear that any noise could lead to catastrophe, and all their preparation and reconnaissance were a risk justified by one goal: to find the key to victory. And then, among bushes and sand, the scouts stumbled upon something that would change the entire strategy. Nearby the Japanese positions, they discovered a large warehouse, hermetically sealed boxes filled with supplies, ammunition, and food. But most importantly, close by was a radio station, a small beacon in the dark night capable of linking Japanese commanders with their higher authorities. Evidence that was hard to ignore, proof that the Japanese presence was much larger than initially assumed at the start of the campaign. About 3,000 Japanese troops, not just a fleeting presence, but a well-prepared, concentrated force ready for battle. If reconnaissance could be mistaken, these facts were an unequivocal proof. The enemy was not just holding positions, they were preparing for a large-scale operation. Information about the number of Japanese forces became a real revelation for the American commanders. While most strategists expected to face a smaller group, this sudden news forced them to reconsider their plans. Edson, endowed with intuition and experience, suggested strengthening the defenses around Lung Riff and preparing for a possible attack there. He saw in this a strategic point that could become the key to success, or, conversely, to disaster. But the command, skeptical and risk-averse, did not immediately share his view. They heard him, but did not want to change course. For in military affairs, even the slightest adjustments can often lead to complete failure. Meanwhile, on September 11, just a few days after the reconnaissance, approximately 840 American soldiers received orders to occupy a strategic position, Ridge. They moved in silence, under the cover of night, feeling the full weight of the task ahead. They had to pass through dangerous thickets, endure a series of exhausting marches, and face the quiet fear of a sudden Japanese counterattack. At that moment, as they settled on the reef, and tense silence hung in the air, broken only by whispered commands and the rustling of weapons, they knew their task was to prepare the defense. But deep down, they understood that the enemy could attack at any moment, and everything would be decided in an instant. In their minds, troubling questions echoed. Would they be able to hold their position? Would their reconnaissance be accurate enough? And most importantly, could their efforts stop the enemy, advancing with full force? The intelligence gathered confirmed. The Japanese were prepared for a large-scale attack. Their scouts, like shadows, had already infiltrated behind American lines, and all evidence indicated that the enemy was not planning to hold back. They were preparing for a battle that would determine the outcome of the entire campaign. Expectations and reality clashed during those night hours. The enemy was not just a force, but a powerful, well-trained machine, moving toward its goal with cold-blooded determination. At that moment, in the silence of the positions, only short commands were heard, and the tension reached its peak. The question each American commander faced was, could their reconnaissance, their early precautions, prevent encirclement and the destruction of the defense? Could they hold the line, prevent the enemy from breaking through their ranks, and stop him from surrounding them from within? The decision made in these critical hours was fateful, and surprisingly, it became the key to what was to come next. Before the commanders, there was only one thought: how their positioning, their preparation, and their courage could influence the outcome of the battle. What significance did each of their steps, each decision made in these moments, hold when the fate of the entire operation hung in the balance? And most importantly, how would what was done, or not done, in these decisive minutes be reflected in the history that was only beginning to unfold? And so, as dawn began to pierce the night darkness and the first rays of the sun touched the sea surface, the soldiers faced not only a strategic question, they faced a dilemma that would determine whether they could turn the tide of events or become victims of the enemy's superior force. Could reconnaissance operations and early precautions prevent encirclement, preserve the defense, and give a chance for victory? The answer to this question seemed to hang in the air, like a heavy shadow looming over the sea and land. But it was precisely in these moments, at this decisive point for the outcome of the battle, that one of the most important mysteries arose. How did the fateful decision regarding the troop positions on the reef influence their subsequent fate? How did the actions and strategic choices made during these hours determine the outcome of the battle, which was to test all their strength? The question that resonates in the heart of everyone who experienced these events is, what if everything had turned out differently? And the answer lies in those fateful actions taken by these people in the darkest moments, actions that forever entered history as examples of bravery, strategy, and determination. That night, when darkness enveloped the island, it seemed that every second could be decisive. Time appeared to freeze before the start of the battle, and only the quiet whisper of waves crashing against the shore reminded of the impending tragedy. At midnight, when most of the sleeping were still unaware of the looming threat, the Japanese forces launched their daring and grand assault. The heavy roar of artillery shells pierced the night air, shaking the ground and causing trees to sway under the powerful onslaught. At that moment, it seemed as if nature itself trembled in anticipation of the bloody clash that would decide the outcome of the battle. The Japanese, armed with determination and numerical superiority, charged forward, hoping to break through the defenses with a single, powerful strike. Their first waves of assault troops, dressed in dark camouflage uniforms, moved swiftly and silently, hidden by the darkness of night. They advanced quickly, trying to catch the enemy off guard. However, despite their aggressiveness, their attack encountered chaos and confusion. In the jungles, where every bush concealed danger and trails led only to new traps, the commanders found themselves in an extremely difficult situation. Mistakes in organization, unclear commands, and lack of clear leadership turned their tactical plan into a disorganized rush that hindered more than helped. Inside the encirclement, amidst impenetrable vegetation and reed thickets, the Japanese troops lost precious time. Their fighters, confused by the complex terrain, could not respond quickly to changes. Every step and every command required extra effort, and the resistance of the American defenders grew more fierce. Thanks to their training and knowledge of the terrain, the Americans were able to quickly occupy advantageous positions, fortified heights, bunkers, narrow passages. Time was passing, and with each hour, the Japanese became more vulnerable, their attacks less organized, and their resistance increasingly destructive. Before dawn, when the sky still retained dark hues of night, the Japanese forces launched a series of powerful and desperate attacks. They hoped to catch the enemy off guard in the darkness, believing that their numerical superiority would compensate for a lack of tactical precision. But the American resistance was unstoppable. Explosions, the roar of machine guns, and the shouts of fighters filled the air with anxiety and terror. Each attack was met with fierce counterfire, and despite their determination, the Japanese troops could not break through the fortified defensive lines. One of the main mistakes made by the Japanese was deploying inadequately prepared forces, units incapable of coordinated action under such conditions. Their assaults appeared disorganized, like chaos unleashed beyond control. Officers often lacked clear plans, and local commanders were forced to improvise, which only led to greater losses and confusion. As a result, despite numerical superiority, the Japanese forces failed to achieve their objectives, breaking the defense, creating a breakthrough, or disorganizing the defenders. So the question arises, why, despite all their advantages, was the Japanese attack so ineffective? Why, despite numerical superiority, were their actions chaotic and poorly coordinated? Analysis shows that the key to the answer lies not only in tactical mistakes, but also in a combination of unforeseen circumstances that unfolded that night. Command errors, overlooked terrain features, weak unit training, and most importantly, the Americans' ability to quickly adapt to the situation, all played a decisive role. Despite facing a numerically superior enemy, they managed to hold key positions, surpassing the Japanese in tactical flexibility and resilience. It is in these mistakes of the Japanese, in their underestimation of the environment's complexity and their inability to quickly reorganize, that the main answer resides. Why did their attack fail to succeed? Why, despite all the prepared plans and numerical advantage, did they find themselves in a situation where their offensive turned into a chaotic assault, incapable of changing the course of the battle? There is a lesson here that cannot be forgotten. Even the most powerful army, if it does not understand how to account for real combat conditions, can end up broken and defeated. But there is also a deeper meaning behind these mistakes. At the critical moment, when it seemed everything was lost, it was precisely unforeseen circumstances and enemy errors that created a chance for survival. On this night, full of chaos and brutality, it was the decisive blunders of the Japanese and the courage of the American defenders that determined the outcome of the battle. Their failures, their mistakes, all of this became the invisible force that allowed them to hold their positions despite the pressure of the enemy's numerical superiority. And it was this extraordinary ability to remain calm amid total disorder, this capacity to exploit every minor weakness of the enemy, that became the key to victory. Ultimately, in this battle, in this night, lie lessons that remain relevant to this day. They serve as a reminder that even the most powerful army cannot win if it does not know how to manage chaos, underestimates the complexity of real combat conditions, and if its command is unable to react swiftly to changing circumstances. It was precisely these mistakes and unexpected circumstances that allowed the Americans not only to hold their strategic positions, but also to repel an enemy that seemed invincible at the beginning of the night. In the darkness, when shadows conceal every crack and every patch of earth, when the sounds of battle merge into a deafening roar and breathing blends with gunfire and explosions, true heroism reveals itself in such moments. During these hours of nocturnal struggle, when hopes of salvation seem fragile and fate is decided at the tip of weapons and the strength of spirit, the team of commanders, among whom Edson stood out, transforms into a living wall of courage, resolve, and unwavering love for their land. Their heroic actions were not merely the execution of orders. They were an expression of inner strength, capable of halting the onslaught of even superior enemy forces, even when all seemed lost. It was precisely at night, on that fateful evening, that the commanders took on the roles not only of strategists, but also of personal inspirers, which often proved to be decisive in battle. Edson, standing at the command post, a small structure illuminated only by the flickering light of a lamp, seemed like a bastion of calm. His weathered, tired face reflected not only physical exhaustion, but also inner determination. Sparks of fire shone in his eyes, the fire that had ignited in him during the earliest hours of the fight and did not extinguish until dawn. He encouraged each soldier, giving each a brief but very important word. Hold on. Don't give up. You cannot break us. His voice, quiet but firm, resounded across the battlefield, filling the soldiers' hearts with confidence that they would not be abandoned in their hour of need, that they were not alone. In this nightmarish hell, where fate hung by a thread, critical moments occurred when the enemy, Japanese troops, broke through some defensive lines. Their chariots, moving across the dusty ground, thundered and billowed smoke like death machines ready to consume everything in their path. At those moments, it seemed that the enemy's advance was an inevitable end. But it was precisely then that the full might of the defense was unleashed. Counterattacks, prepared by the command, sounded like thunderclaps in a clear sky. Artillery fire, like lightning, shattered the night's silence, striking enemy columns, knocking over chariots, and destroying personnel. Every shot fired, every shell hit, was not only a display of tactical skill, but also an incredible act of courage by commanders and soldiers alike. Complementing the picture of heroic defense, one cannot overlook how disorganized parts of the Japanese forces began to confuse their own actions. Their commanders, unsure of where the main attack was, issued conflicting orders, creating chaos within their ranks. In these conditions, when the enemy became entangled like a spider's web, the defenders' chances of success significantly increased. It was no coincidence. Tactical agility and resilience of the commanders, their ability to read the battle map and quickly adapt to the changing situation, played a crucial role. Time after time, in moments when it seemed that everything was coming to an end, it was their decisive actions that gave a chance to survive and hold strategic positions. And finally, the climax of this night battle was the final strike, the use of aviation. American planes, like celestial angels, soared into the sky to halt the last wave of Japanese offensive. Their bombings on enemy chariots, groups, and hideouts were not just tactical decisions. They were a manifestation of unity and resolve, showing that even in the darkest moments, when the enemy seemed to have reached invisible boundaries, the defenders had the hope and right to believe. The roar of aircraft strikes, smoke and flames spreading across the night sky, became a symbol that the fight continued, that heroism does not die but transforms into a powerful force capable of changing the course of the battle. What drives these soldiers and commanders to hold the line, despite the enemy's numerical superiority? What underpins their unwavering determination, their ability not to surrender when it seems that everything is against them? The enemy's numbers, technological superiority, and fatigue creeping even into the most resilient. Analysis shows that the key to their resilience lies not only in training or military experience, but also in an inner steel core forged through constant trials. Their faith in their righteousness, in their mission, and in each other. That is what gave them the strength to keep fighting. There was something more in these fighters than just a desire to survive. It was an unbreakable sense of duty that overcame fear, exhaustion, and despair. The feeling that they were not merely defending their bodies but protecting their land, their history, and their honor. These night battles reveal a truth. Heroism is not the absence of fear but the ability to overcome it in the most difficult situations. That is why, despite the enemy's numerical superiority and seeming hopelessness, these commanders and their soldiers managed to stand firm. Their heroism is not only a personal trait, but a strategic act expressed in every movement, every order, every breath and exhale. Their determination proves that even when it seems that forces are equal, the most important thing is not quantity, but the quality of spirit, resilience, and faith. This night will forever be remembered as an example of how personal courage and tactical brilliance can surpass any enemy's strength and power. What was the key to holding this bitter, bloody height? What decisions, personal qualities, and tactical moves became the invisible threads that held the fate of this battle in their hands? The answer lies in the unbroken spirit of the commanders, in their ability to think and act quickly, and in their willingness to risk their lives for the common cause. Their courage became not just an example, but a decisive factor in the outcome of the night battle, because when everything seemed lost, it was they, these heroes, who held back the onslaught, maintained the position, and proved to the world that even in the darkest night, the light of heroism does not go out. He burns brightly, illuminating the path to victory, which is born not only from the strength of weapons, but from the strength of spirit. On that night when darkness enveloped Guadalcanal Island and the stars shimmered brightly above the jungle, something fateful was happening. The time was 1:05 in the night, when the Japanese command, seemingly blinded by their own vanity and short-sightedness, made a decision that would change the course of the campaign. General Kagawa, a strict and decisive man, issued an order for a complete retreat from the Key Ridge, a strategic hub that had been the scene of bloody battles for many months. It was not just an order. It was the final, fatal act that marked the beginning of the end for Japanese forces on Guadalcanal. The losses sustained in this battle were colossal. Over 850 men, their bodies scattered across the battlefield, many destroyed, abandoned in the jungle, like a fading shadow of an era that would never return. At dawn, when the first rays of the sun pierced through the foliage, American troops, already buoyed by their recent victory, began an active pursuit. Their arsenal included weapons that had become symbols of their superiority. automatic rifles, grenades, machine guns, all aimed at destroying the remaining Japanese units. But despite the swift advance, the Japanese managed to escape, disappear into the depths of the jungle, dissolve into the endless greenery that seemed both a living shelter and a graveyard for those brave enough to stay on the battlefield. Their retreat was disorganized, chaotic, with numerous losses, many wounded, many killed. Yet despite this, their strategic position was forever shattered. The losses on both sides were staggering. The Americans lost about 80 of their fighters, their bodies lying among destroyed vehicles and debris, evidence of the fierce battles that shook their belief in the invincibility of Japanese forces. The Japanese, by estimates, lost more than 500 men. Their bodies and weapons were scattered across the territory, a testament to the insane fury and desperation with which they fought for every inch of land. But most importantly, this battle became a turning point. After its conclusion, American forces not only took the heights, but secured their control position, which became the foundation for further advances in the campaign. The victory on the ridge became a symbol of a new era, a pivotal moment in the war that put all doubts to rest. But why did the Japanese forces suffer such a defeat? Why was their unit, despite such resolute and desperate resistance, forced to retreat? What were the reasons for this strategic failure? Analysis shows that the main cause was underestimating the enemy and their own capabilities. The Japanese, accustomed to quick victories at the start of the campaign, faced the harsh reality of American tactics, their superiority in firepower and mobility. Confusion reigned within the command, and decisions were made spontaneously, without proper analysis of the situation. The most vital resources, weapons, ammunition, and medicines, were scattered across the battlefield, many of them destroyed or abandoned in the jungle in a panic. Unquestionable evidence shows that Japanese units, despite their combat effectiveness and resilience, found themselves trapped by their own tactics, which could not withstand the onslaught of the superior enemy. This defeat had a profound impact on the strategic landscape of the region. The Japanese lost control of the ridge, a key point through which communications and supplies flowed. Their reputation, as invincible and ruthless warriors, was at risk. Internal disagreements within the command grew stronger, and planning for future operations became more cautious and calculated. Overall, this defeat marked the beginning of the end for Japan's strategy on Guadalcanal, as it demonstrated that even the most daring and well-prepared forces could not withstand modern firepower and the tactical mastery of the Allies. This battle became a symbol of how a single decisive victory could change the course of the war. It not only strengthened U.S. control over the island, but also became a symbol of a new era in the Pacific campaign. After this battle, the Allies gained confidence that allowed them to shift to active offensive operations, while Japanese command rethought their strategy, realizing that even the strongest enemies, even the invincible, could be defeated. Ultimately, this battle was not just a fight for the heights, it was a struggle for the future, for the meaning of the entire campaign, for the fate of the entire region. What consequences did this bloody clash have? What lessons did both sides learn from it? And how did it influence subsequent operations? The answer is clear. Victory on the ridge sent a powerful signal. The Allies gained confidence, and the Japanese became aware of their vulnerability. This battle became a catalyst for change, laying the groundwork for ultimate victory. In its shadow, a new strategy was taking shape, and each subsequent strike against Japanese positions grew more decisive and more ruthless. In this sense, the outcome of that night was not just a moment in history. It was a starting point, the foundation of a new era, an era in which victory no longer seemed unattainable, but inevitable. In the silence of the night, when the last rays of the sun disappear beyond the horizon, and across the tranquil expanses of the Pacific, as if in memory of heroic past, a gentle whisper of the wind sounds. It is here, on the most distant islands and in the depths of naval battles, that the legend of a man is born, whose fate became a symbol of courage, strategic genius, and unwavering devotion to the homeland. His name is Merritt "Red Mike" Edson, a name forever inscribed in history as one of the most outstanding commanders of the American Marine Corps and Navy during World War II. His personal story is not only a biography of a soldier, but also a reflection of an era when the fate of entire nations was decided, and heroism became an integral part of national identity. During the years when the world was engulfed in the flames of a global conflict, when the fates of millions hung by a fragile thread and crucial decisions were made in remote offices and on battlefields, Edson experienced his rise. In 1923, at a time when America was just beginning to establish its global power, he was promoted to Brigadier General, a recognition of his outstanding achievements and strategic talent. Then, in 1943, he became the commander of the Fleet Marine Force, Pacific, the force that was to become the main line of defense in the Pacific theater of operations. During those years, when the war reached its peak and the world seemed to teeter on the brink of destruction, his role became especially significant. Let us remember how he led his units in the most difficult battles, how his decisions saved hundreds of lives and changed the course of the fights. His gaze was steady and his voice was resolute. He knew that every second, every minute on the battlefield was a chance for victory or defeat, and he used all his knowledge to lead his soldiers to triumph. His participation in battles, especially in the Battle of the Ridge, became not just an episode, it became a symbol of heroism, an eternal monument to courage. The name Edson's Ridge is not just a geographical point, but a sacred symbol where the strength of the human spirit was demonstrated, where a man became a hero, and heroism became part of the national mythology. But what exactly made his personality and that battle so unique? Why did this particular fight and this individual become symbols of strategic genius and bravery in American military history? What is the secret of that fateful battle, which was etched into the memory of generations? This is a question that is answered not only by historians and military experts, but also by all who truly value heroism. For behind every heroic act lies not only personal courage, but also deep analysis, strategic foresight, and the ability to make decisions in conditions of complete uncertainty. It was in this battle that all these qualities were revealed: decisiveness, tactical flexibility, and the skill to fight in the most difficult conditions. It became a historical lesson, an example for future generations of military strategists. Despite all the hardships from which this legend was born, Edson's personality continues to inspire. His legacy is not only a memorial monument on the ridge, but also a living reminder of how one person, possessing bravery and intelligence, can change the course of history. Time passed, and his contribution to the development of naval tactics and military strategy remained invaluable. After the war, he retired as a major general and later became the executive director of the National Armed Forces Association, where he continued to serve his country, not on the battlefield, but in the sphere of public influence. His life story is an example of how a person can not only fight, but also continue to serve, changing society for the better. He died in 1948, at the height of his powers, at the age of just over 58. His death marked the end of an era, but his memory remains eternal. His acts of heroism and achievement stand as undeniable proof that his service was not in vain. He was awarded the Medal of Honor, Navy Cross, Silver Star, and 2 Legion of Merit medals, testaments to the recognition of his valor and dedication. These awards are not just medals and medals. They symbolize unparalleled bravery and strategic brilliance, which will forever be part of the national history. It was his participation in the Battle of Edson's Ridge that became a turning point, a symbol of resilience and heroism that unites generations of American servicemen. In this battle, the full power of the human spirit was revealed, the ability to surpass oneself, overcome fear, and resist the enemy. The name Edson's Ridge has become an eternal monument, a reminder that even in the most hopeless situations, true heroism is born from determination and inner strength. Why then did this person and this battle gain such fame? Why did this story become a cornerstone of national mythology? What is their universal meaning? The answer lies in the fact that these events are not only lessons in strategy and tactics, but also a story of the human spirit capable of overcoming any obstacle. It is a story of how one person, driven by an inner sense of duty, can become a symbol of an entire era, inspiring future generations to new achievements and feats. Today, many years later, the legacy of Red Mike continues to live on. His name is spoken in textbooks, his heroism cited in speeches, and his memory serves as a foundation for those who walk the path of service and courage. His story is not just a page in history, but a living example of what it means to be a true hero. And like all true legacies, it does not fade with the passing of a person, but transforms into an eternal flame that continues to illuminate the way for new generations of American servicemen and all who believe in the power of courage and strategic genius.